All right, welcome back. This is Struck episode 10. Alan, how you doing?
Hey Dan, good. How's Washington D.C. doing?
We're hanging in there. Starting to get nice. 82 degrees I think today, partly sunny. 85 yesterday.
Ooh.
Interesting. Just a
that's not bad.
Sudden jump into summer weather, so it's nice.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
No baseball.
Terrible. No nothing. There's no nothing. But the National Mall is very green. I'm gonna go down there today. I guess the center cut portion of the mall, that's such a weird saying. Mall always sounds strange to me because who doesn't associate the word mall with like a shopping mall, like going in and out of Forever 21 or like know. Not that's where I shop, but my little sister.
It's a park. It's a park.
Yeah, but like the term is strange. It's just like, anyway, I digress. But the grass, just like all the wildlife, like people have been talking about wildlife coming back with the coronavirus stuff. The grass is just superb, super green, dense, because people aren't on it. They've kind of like kept us off, and there's not that many people in general. So the parks here in DC are alive and well. Did
you see that video yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I'm just thinking because no one's out on the streets right now. You see that tiger walking down the street of that town of Mexico, and the guy's trying to lasso the tiger down the street? You see that?
That seems like a fool's errand, trying to catch a tiger. That's a good way to get eaten by that tiger. You just gotta let that tiger go to an extent. You gotta tranquilizer dart it and call it a day.
They lassoed this tiger in the street. Unbelievable. Like, what's there a tiger in the street? Is that somebody's pet that just got out? It's kind of like Florida with the pythons, right? Like, people let off their pet pythons, and then they they go out in the wild, and they're 50 feet long, and they're...
Yeah. I remember seeing this video, and it was somewhere in, like, maybe, like, India, or, where, like, jaguars and, like, cheetahs are, like... And, again, I don't know if this is exactly where, because I don't know if cheetahs are in India, but there was, like, one of these big cats. It wasn't a tiger, obviously, but it was, like, a jaguar or a cheetah, like, one of those medium-sized... big cats, but it was like in this little town, and it was just like running around, like tackles a dude, then everyone's like chasing it around, and it was kind of terrifying how fast this scared, like 5 foot long, whatever it was. I think it was like a jaguar, but yeah, it was just this cat was like trying to get out. Everyone was like trying to shoot out of the little village. It was like jumping up this wall, this building, and just like it was scary because if you're anywhere around, this cat could just like, oh, I'm going to go punch you in the face, or I'm going to go bite you real fast. I'm going to try to go this way and go that way. I mean, the agility of these wild animals is just impressive.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I'm not trying to... That tiger, that jaguar's walking down the street, just go at your own pace, sir. I'm not going to bother you.
Fine.
Like, just don't
enjoy
mind
your
me.
Day.
Yeah, we're good. And like we got murder, Asian giant hornets now too. Like, no thanks. Goodbye, sir.
No.
Go about your business.
Well, here, the bears have finally woken up from their winter slumber, and they're looking for food, right? So the next town over, they had a bear end up in a car, and they're not even sure how it got in there, but it was at nighttime, and you hear the car shaking outside, like, what the heck's going on? And as the news reported, it is like, looked outside, the car's shaking, realized that there's a bear in the car, and the bear can't get out. So what are you going to do with this bear? Well, in the meantime, the bear's all upset, so he just starts eating everything in the car, seats, steering wheel, console, just starts ripping apart the car. So they brought up another car next to this car, and then they pop the door open, and the bear shoots out. But at that point, the car is totaled.
No, for sure.
The bear just totaled that car. Now, so that reminds us here that when you go grocery shopping, that... probably the thing to do is always close your doors. You come in and out, and make sure like your kids aren't still in the car with the groceries, the doors open, because you never know. Right now, bears have the rain, or just all over the place. What a
weird thing to have to think about. That's
yeah.
such a weird thing that, well, that's crazy. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
which makes sense, and I'm sure in a lot of places in the country, that is a thought that people have had. Like if you live near Yosemite or something, or you just live in a heavily forested woods, that is a thing, I'm sure. Yeah, if you have bears in the area, food outside in your car, makes sense. But I've never had to think about that. Yeah.
No, like our trash cans are in our garage. The reason you put trash cans in the garage is because if you don't, then you'll have a bear in your backyard. So you always put your trash cans in your garage, just to keep the bears away. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Life in the wilderness.
Yeah. Well, speaking of keeping things indoors, news report in Singapore, a FedEx pilot was arrested and he was sentenced to 4 weeks in prison after leaving his hotel room for 3 hours to buy masks and thermometer.
Yeah.
What do you got here?
Isn't that nuts?
It's like, from Alaska.
Come on. Right. I mean, the guy's a pilot. He's not somebody that's, trying to cause trouble. All he's trying to do is probably move medical supplies from one country to another. That's probably what a lot of these flights are about, moving essentials around. And then you arrest this pilot, and I get the whole thing where obviously he broke a law. He probably didn't even know it existed. Maybe he knew it existed. But is that the person you want off the street? It'd be like arresting a doctor, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Is that the person you want off the street right now? No, you don't. And what harm really came about it? You want to fine him? You want to, make FedEx pay $1,000 fine, but putting this guy out of commission? That's to me is a little overkill. I'm not sure we would do that. I
don't know, Alan. He sounds like a real monster, leaving his hotel room for 3 hours to get medical supplies.
That professional pilot, who's probably spent most of his life learning how to fly and airplanes. Yeah, no, this is the wrong guy to put behind.
Well, and it doesn't say in this article what the law is. Like, you just can't leave for any reason, because that seems like a valid reason. Like, he's got a hall pass. Like, hey, like, teacher said I can go to the bathroom. Like, that seems crazy. Like, what is the rule? Right? But it doesn't say that here. I don't know.
Well, you can't drink there either, right? There's no bars there, so I don't know what
in Singapore.
Yeah,
man, they're just trying to make everyone angry. That's
well, I don't think that's a place where there's a lot of if the pilot's out and he's out, I don't know, playing craps in the back alley or something. Like, okay,
yeah, all right, guys, cool, don't play dice in the back alley. No cockfighting.
During
quarantine,
right? No, it's not healthy, right?
Yeah.
But this guy, you got to think FedEx is going out of their mind right now about this and trying to work the government, try to deal with the police, and then trying to get their pilot back, because now you got to spool up somebody else to fly this route. Golly, come on.
Yeah, that's a shame. In other, in business news, so Phasor has filed for bankruptcy. So tell me a little bit about Phasor. I mean, you know them quite well.
Yeah, Phasor was, or is probably still, because I think they're in bankruptcy to restructure, but they went through bankruptcy before. They make an electronically steerable antenna that's made for SATCOM use, and they were trying to get into the aircraft market because their system would be more aerodynamic, possibly weigh less, maybe have slightly better performance than the mechanically steered antennas that we use for SATCOMs right now. But there's a lot of difficulties with those systems, mostly having to do with heat generation, because if they're electronically steered, which means they use a lot of power, which means they get warm, or in some cases they get hot, and then you got to deal with all this heat and stuff. So, there was always been a case for electronically steered antennas, and Phasor had a very viable product. It was a matter of just a timing, that the timing was bad when they're in the midst of development and they're spending a lot of cash, and now there's a lot of airplanes off the market. They're not sitting in fields waiting for the airline industry to come back. It's probably just a matter of timing. I don't think electronically steered antennas are going to go away, and Phasor will probably be back. And obviously the engineers there are pretty smart, because they designed this antenna. It's not easy to do. You just don't wish things like this to happen.
Yeah. So tell me a little more about electronically steered antennas. Like, are other companies making those? Like, does ThinkCom make those? Because we talked about them in a previous episode. Like, is that how current is that? Is like the cutting edge of technology right now, or what is that as far as like SATCOMs?
It's been known for a long time. You basically take what we've had electronically steered antennas on a lot of things for a very long time. Some of the most interesting ones, I think, are on ships, but on the aircraft side, mostly military aircraft will use steerable antennas, and what they are just an array of antennas, and how you phase them relative. So you got looks like a 16 by 16 grid of antennas, and then you phase them differently so that it effectively steers the beam without you mechanically moving it. it works. Obviously, it's just electromagnetics, right? And then a bunch of electronics to control it. ThinCom already does that. Now, ThinCom's a combination. It has electronically steered and it's mechanically steered. So they got the pie plate design, the pizza plate design, where it spins, but it also can steer kind of up down electronically.
I like that you're very specific that it wasn't a pie, it was more of a pizza. That's a very important distinction for our listenership here. Guys, gals listening, this is not a pie plate, it's a pizza plate. Thank you. All right.
Well, it has to do with relative size, right? So I'm trying to put it in perspective and things.
Is this New York style pizza? Is this Chicago deep dish? Is this Giordano's pizza? I mean, this is serious stuff here.
Well, okay, so it's much more like a Chicago deep dish pizza, I would say, because it's thick. It's thick. It's probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. So it's not thin. It's not a thin crust New York style. It's more like a thick crust pizza from Chicago.
I love that you're indulging this nonsensical.
I've been to Chicago. I've had Chicago pizza. Hey, yeah, engineers got to eat, right? So engineers travel a lot typically, and we eat a lot of restaurants. So we have pretty much had every kind of food there in the world, particularly in the States. I've eaten everywhere. So I've eaten at all those pizza places in Chicago. So it's much more like that, where it's a deep dish pizza thing.
Okay.
And it spins, right? So it's like a large deep dish pizza.
Okay. Pizza expert Alan Hall discusses SATCOM radar design. Well, yeah. We'll change.
It's just like that.
Exactly.
Now, the Phasor thing was different. It's kind of like Chimera. Chimera's doing similar things, where it's just basically a flat piece. And SpaceX is doing something similar. There's a lot of people doing similar things. But it's a flat plate, and it doesn't move. There's no mechanical moving parts. So it's all steered. Now, issues on airplanes are that airplanes are never really stable. Obviously, you fly on an airplane, it gets bumpy. You're trying to track this spacecraft that's in geosynchronous orbit, and I think that's, I forget how far that is away. I used to know. I used to work in that industry. It's a long ways away. So you're trying to focus on this one pinpoint in the sky, and the airplane's bouncing around all the time. It's hard to do that electronically. It's hard to do it mechanically. So it's a complex thing. It takes a lot of power, and they're not electronically steered antennas require more power to look to the side than a mechanical. And a mechanical, you just turn it and look. And on electronic, you actually have to do a lot more work to get it, a lot more power to do that same sort of thing. So, and the problem with electronically steered antennas is they generate a lot of heat. And if you're on the ground, and say you're in Saudi Arabia or someplace that's really hot, and you're running a lot of data through it, it's going to get warm. And you got to do something to deal with that heat. That's the problem.
Gotcha. So we're going to transition. We're going to talk a bunch today about electric aircraft, and this is an interesting topic because there's a lot of new small companies that are trying their hand at this. So the first one, this one is a concept, and it's really, honestly, kind of bizarre looking. And it's Zero by Joe Doucette, who, if you look through Joe Doucette's portfolio of stuff he's designed, he's like a crazy, incredible designer. And this is just a concept plane. And he's not an aerospace engineer, but this what do you got on the Zero plane concept?
I'm not.
It looks strange.
Yeah, airplanes have a couple of restraints, like where the center of gravity is relative to the center of lift, and that's what we call stall. If you get in the wrong condition, it won't fly right. That airplane looks like it has a really weird center of gravity.
Yeah, because like lift. Most of it is forward, and the wings are very far shifted towards the back. Which, at first you're like, is this like a pencil? It's like a flying pencil.
Well, you ever been on an airplane where they've asked you to change seats because of weight and balance? You ever been in a small airplane where they've done that?
I haven't. No.
No? Okay. Well, maybe I'm heavier looking. So
maybe one day I'll get asked to move. Maybe one day.
Excuse me, sir, we need a weight and balance the airplane. Can you move up to the front of the airplane for weight and balance? Like, okay, why are you picking on me? But that's the weight and balance is how to keep the airplane stable. Whether you distribute the weight on the airplane does matter, right? If you get the weight too far back or too far forward, it doesn't fly right.
Well, that was why that one aircraft, was it a 747 that crashed? I feel like it was an Iranian 747. I saw this video. It's terrifying. And they caught it on video where it's going up and it just like flutters and then just smashes into the ground and the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was a Iranian military, I think a cargo aircraft. And they said, and I could be getting some of the details wrong because this wasn't in our layout, our plan for today, but this video it's terrifying because that was a real plane with like real, it looks fake, like it's so crazy, but they said that they thought it was carrying a lot of cargo and that it probably shifted. Like maybe a strap broke. Like maybe a strap broke and a big piece of cargo shifted, and that's probably what happened.
Weight and balance, right?
Yeah.
You get the center of gravity off, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. You can't do that, right? And the same sort of thing. If you have cargo break loose in an airplane, it's a big deal. Big deal, right? So this airplane that Joe's designed, to me, looks like it's not airworthy for the start. Yeah. And it kind of relates back to an earlier conversation we had about what are we doing with aircraft design. If you know a lot about airplanes right now.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a fair question for anyone, because you start to look at these, and this was the same thing with electric cars. You're like, hey, okay, this is an electric car. Why does it have to be so ugly? Hey, look, another electric car. Why does it look like that? Why can't it look like a normal car? Okay, so it's electric, but does that mean it has to look like a flying like clownfish or a driving clown? Like the Honda Prius or the Toyota Prius is still just awful looking. It is, and its design has nothing to do with the fact that it's electric. It's just like we chose that.
Well, okay. Having built an electric car at one point in college, aerodynamics are huge in terms of energy usage. So you're trying to build the slipperiest aerodynamic, lowest rolling resistance thing you can design, right? That's why the tires are narrow like that, right? Yeah. So they're trying to do that.
Makes sense for the new Cybertruck for Tesla, right? That seems to fly in the face of that driving trapezoid of ugliness.
Yeah, it's ugly, and it's going to sell 1 million of them. Yeah,
not to me. I would never drive that behemoth. But anyway, so why are aircraft designers of these electric aircraft trying to go out of their way to make them so different? Is this just like we're trying to look cool, or is this actually an important aspect of it? What do you have on that?
Well, if you think about the number of aircraft over the years that have been cool looking and then also never gone anywhere, I've lost track on all those airplanes. Burt Rutan was a big designer way back in the 70s and 80s. The Beach Starship was a Burt Rutan design. He had very interesting concepts for airplanes. The airplane that flew around the world nonstop, that was a Burt Rutan airplane. And that's in the mall there at the Air and Space Museum, actually.
Okay.
So these unique shaped airplanes have should be designed for very specific purposes. Like if it's a heavy lift aircraft or it's got to glide a long way, totally fine. I'm okay with all that. But when you get to something that's just a commercial aircraft to carry people from point A to point B, then what are we doing, right? If you've got some genius breakthrough in aerodynamics, great. Let's get it out on the table and let's hear about it. But otherwise, what the heck are we doing making the process to certify an airplane even more difficult than it is already? Anytime you introduce a new or novel feature and you're trying to certify it with FAA, EASA, I don't care, pick any of those, Transport Canada, pick any of them, you're going to have trouble because they have to figure out what the rules are for that different flight characteristic or flight regime or performance, right? And so why do you do that? If you want to make an electric airplane, then make an electric airplane. It can have a wing, it can have an empennage, it can have a fuselage, it can have landing gear. Simplify the thing, because the technology you're trying to promote is the electric motor battery concept. That's what you're trying to promote. That's why the E-Flyer and George By makes a ton of sense, because he's building an airplane. He's building an airplane that's run with electricity. Genius, right? Don't try to rechange the world, because you, in this particular case, this is why Elon Musk does not design airplanes. Elon Musk doesn't design airplanes because there's a regulatory body that puts a lot of requirements on you that force you down a certain design path. And when you have an airplane, you have lawsuits. So in a car, the worst, let's just get realistic about this. In a car, if you have a car accident, most likely people aren't going to die. If they do, it's going to limited subset. And an airplane, any sort of moderate to significant crashes can involve dozens to hundreds of people. So therefore, you have all these different regulatory requirements, and the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks and all these guys that are designing all this stuff don't get into airplanes because there's a huge downside risk to do it. And yet we get a lot of the smaller players, I'll call it, that try to redesign airplanes to do all these things which we don't really need, right? We just need to be more efficient about the way we travel. Let's get that, or we need to be safer in the way we travel. Let's do those things first. We can figure out how to create new aerodynamics on the fighter aircraft. I just don't get it, because what you don't want to do in an aircraft is fail in a new aircraft program. You got enough expenditures. Why do you keep adding on problems? I don't get it.
Yeah, and that's something I hadn't thought about before, because they were talking about, as I was doing a lot of research here with like Ampaire, they have a retrofitted electric plane, and that compared to say the Eviation Alice, which is a brand new, built from the ground up, quirky, kind of strange looking small commuter plane that they project will be $4 million in cost and $200 an hour to operate, which is great. But that's from the ground up. So they're talking about this is going to be a 2 to 3 year process to certify the Alice versus a plane where they're just taking an existing certified plane and retrofitting the engine with a electric engine.
Yep.
I mean, how much time is that going to save them and headaches on the certification process, retrofitting versus ground up? It'll
probably save them $1 billion.
Is that good?
I'm dead serious about that. It'll probably save them $1 billion. To make an airplane that carries 9-10 people isn't cheap. It's several $100 million effort. To retrofit an old Cessna Skymaster costs $50,000, $100,000, and you're proving the same point. You're trying to prove the point that you can do an electric aircraft, and if you use an existing airframe that has been proven over time, like the Skymaster was developed during the late 1960s, early 1970s. We know how it performs. So putting an electric motor, taking out one gas motor and putting an electric motor, you still have the remaining gas motor, makes infinite sense. The Alice thing where they got the engines out on the wingtips, have we ever certified something like that? Nope. As far as I remember, we haven't. So you got all these loading issues, you got these torque issues on the wing, you've got propellers out in the right. So it looks cool at an air show, and I'm not saying it's not a good concept. It may all be there, but in order to get to some sort of production thing, you have to take it in stages. And this has been the Cessna approach for a long time. It's been the Beech Aircraft approach for a long time, and those are the aircraft companies that have survived. The other ones have all gone away. Even Cirrus has done this very, very wisely over time. Start with a basic fundamental aircraft, and then keep working it. Like Cirrus has a new jet, right? Which is an outgrowth of their propeller-driven airplanes. Diamond Aircraft's done something very similar. They start with a very basic fundamental design and improve it over time. We need to get back to that point again. Even with the new regulation change in Part 23, where they've taken a lot of the restrictive rules out to open up the doors, it doesn't mean that the amount of design effort is going to change all that much. You're still going to be spending a bunch of money. And so you try to minimize the cash burn. And for some reason, we haven't figured that one out. It's troubling, because that's an industry I love, and I participate in all the time. And you just wish they could think about this a little bit differently.
Well, you wonder if there's some design aspects that require maybe a whole new ground-up design, like trying to stuff in as many batteries as they can, like stuff like that, building them into the frame, like the way Tesla's batteries of their cars is kind of integrated into the frame of the car. Okay. So I don't know the specifics. That could be part of it. I'm not sure, but
that could be.
What do you think of the cost savings? So it says, like for the Alice, for example, they estimate $200 per hour to operate a plane. I mean, how does that compare with a regular small 12-person commuter
Seems
jet?
Low. Seems like a fraction of what it should be.
Yeah, I think it's like five times lower, if not more.
Yeah, I was going to say $1,000 an hour.
Yeah,
would be typical for those kind of things. I remember when I worked at Beech, and you had to rent the airplane when you worked at Beech Aircraft to go somewhere. So you had to pay for the pilots, you had to pay for the fuel as part of your program expense. So if you had a bunch of engineers that needed to get to Salt Lake City, for example, it was less expensive to load up an airplane you'd have to pay for it. You have to pay the company back to load the airplane instead of buying airline tickets. So it didn't make sense. But I remember pricing that out in $1,000 an hour. I think a King Air was like $500 an hour. A Beach Jet or some sort of jet is $1,000 an hour. So the faster you go, the more expensive it is, but the less time it takes. So it roughly evens out. So in a King Air, it takes longer to get there, but it's less expensive per hour. It always out about the same. Yes, but to think you're going to cut down the amount of costs per hour by a factor of 5 seems implausible. Not to say that they haven't done their homework, but on the face of it, seems really difficult to believe.
Yeah, and that might just be one of those. I mean, I think when a piece of advice back with my first business that my cousin who's in the financial sector gave me, he's like, whatever you're making, because we were going through a sort of pivot, and he said, whatever you're predicting your expenses to be, and whatever you're predicting, he's like, exaggerate your expenses by maybe 50% and reduce the income that you expect by maybe 30%. So yeah. He's like, and so it could be just something like that, where that's maybe the pie in the sky answer. And you'll see when they get there to production if that's really that. But I'm sure it is a significant reduction. But yeah, that's a pretty big cut. So you'll have to see if that really plays out that way. Right.
There's a lot of your financial advisor is right. There's a lot of overhead you don't think of when you haven't been through it. There's a lot of overhead.
Well, yeah, and it's easy to just throw things down on people. Like, oh yeah, we'll get this many customers, and it'll only be that many. You just always forget of the unexpected expenses and the headaches and the time lost and all these things, and just things don't go the way you think they're going to go. And
if it was easy, a lot of people would be doing it, and if it was financially viable, then be a lot more people doing it. And over time, from the 1960s to today, we've seen fewer and fewer and fewer aircraft companies. It's gotten more and more difficult to do it. That's why the Part 23 regulations have changed in the last year or two to try to open that up to make it less onerous to try to start an aircraft company. I don't know if we're seeing fruit from that quite yet, just because of the whole COVID-19 thing that's going on. But some of this has to play out. I am optimistic that we're going to get back to what I consider sort of the heyday of some of the airplane business, which is sort of early 70s, late 60s, when they're pumping out dozens of airplanes a day. That would be great if we could get back to those numbers, but the overhead is so expensive. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, the way we could save everyone, we could do this. This could be, we probably shouldn't air this because this is a big idea, but we develop a vaccine or a cure that we can crop dust out of planes. Airline industry comes back, everyone's saved. And we'll use electric airplanes. So electric airplanes are just crop dusting the entire country in a coronavirus eradicating aerosol. It's perfect. It solves everyone's problems all at once.
We'll get right on that, right?
Yeah, and then with our billions of dollars from this idea, we'll then invest that in small businesses locally to save them too. So you heard it here first. You heard it here first.
You got that all figured out, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds good. So last one on the list here, the Airbus E-Fan X. Ugh. So, all right.
Well, they stopped that's the one they stopped the program on recently, right? That's the 4-engine thing that they were. Yeah. And I think they took down their site. I was trying to look for the site this week. And I think the site's
gone. It's still here. Yeah. It's
is it? Okay.
Still kicking. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So why did that fail? That's kind of what I want to discuss. I mean, it looks like four engines, but one of them was going to be a 2 megawatt electric. Mm-hmm. So they just ran out of money, huh?
I'm assuming that Airbus is trying to conserve funds. Like Boeing's done a lot of that too. All the airplane companies have basically shut down all the R&D programs just to conserve cash. It's probably a short-term thing. Hopefully they get it back up and running because the aircraft is sort of assembled. Last I saw of it, it was pretty much ready to go out and do some testing. Mm-hmm. And this is the way we test all new engines, by the way, is we put the new engine on an existing airframe and then go fly it around. So like we're out in Phoenix, out in the desert out there, and GE was testing their new GE90 engine, GE90X, I think it was. And they had it mounted to a 747, so it's a 4-engine airplane. They'd taken one of the engines off and put this engine on. It looked awkward, but so that's the way you check out new engine performance. You attach it to another airplane that has multiple excuse me, multiple engines.
Because how many does it need to stay? I mean, how many engines can you lose before the plane goes down? I mean, how many of those four are essential? Yeah,
I think two. I think are essential for that airplane. The GE90 engine is such a huge thrust generating engine. I wonder how they deal with that on the thrust side. It's way more than the standard engines on a 747. But you'll see that, like, you can actually Google some of those things. You can actually see engine test bed aircraft. It's sort of interesting to watch because you got these really funky shaped airplanes. And sometimes, like, I think it was Honeywell, who makes jet engines also, attached an engine to the side of a fuselage, I think of a 757. They've done a lot of testing with that test bed. Yeah, so it's funky to see, but any new engine development thing is big. You're going to spend a ton of money. You got to go fly it, obviously. You got to do all these different kinds of tests. So I think, and just in terms of Airbus expense, they were just trying to minimize that. Those flight test hours are so expensive. It just makes sense to kind of shut it down for a while. But I don't think you're going to see the end of electric aircraft. It's going to continue, especially if the Tesla work actually happens and the battery costs come down. We're going to have electric aircraft at some point, especially at the sort of the kit level, the homebrew level. I know Oshkosh. Did you hear Oshkosh is not going to happen this year? Which is the Experimental Aircraft Association's fly-in in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And I've been to that when I was, it was probably back in the 80s, last time when I was there. But there's 100,000 plus people.
Did they have good pizza there? How was the pizza in Oshkosh?
Well, no, you're in Wisconsin. You're kind of up northern Wisconsin. Now, a lot of cheese there. That's what I know.
Exactly.
There's a lot of cheese there.
A lot of cheese there.
A lot of cheese there, and there's a lot of people. Oh my gosh, that's a huge thing, and that's where you see all the homebrew kit airplanes show up, and all the different varieties and all the unique layouts, and everybody is trying something new. Happens at that level. It's very similar. I always look at it as Oshkosh used to be like back in the late 70s, early 80s, the computer developers, all those little clubs used to have where people were developing computers. It's the same sort of thing, except on the aircraft level. And some of the newest technology actually comes out of places like Oshkosh, I think. Because you can try it out small, right? Just try it out small, see how it works, and then you can make it bigger over time. Someone asked me the other day, was asking about the 787 and all this great new technology in the 787. It's a carbon fiber airplane, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but Beech Aircraft did it 20 years earlier, roughly, with Starship. And before that, there was a Learfan. And a lot of the people that worked on my program, when I worked at Beech Aircraft, we were working on composite jets. A lot of those guys, engineers, ended up in Seattle designing the 787. So realistically, a lot of the stuff starts small and then percolates up to the big guys. And now Airbus is building airplanes out of carbon fiber, like they were building in Oshkosh 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Start small.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, and that's what they're talking about. Most of these electric aircraft are just going to be little kind of commuter planes, right? Like under 500 miles, stuff like that. And potentially, and I think this was the case mostly with Eviation, their Alice aircraft. They were hoping that one could be same kind of like puddle jumps to places where they don't have a lot of air travel, like a lot of Americans not flying there a bunch or whatever. Just smaller airstrips, yeah.
That's what Bay Aerospace was doing, because they were doing. They have a company they hooked up with that's going to be doing basically shuttle flights out of LAX to some of the surrounding airports, flying up north to Sacramento, Oakland, those kind of things, where you can actually fly into LAX on an international flight, and then instead of having to sit and wander around or try to drive back up to Sacramento or down south to San Diego, you just hop on this little e-flyer and go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and then we're going to prove out electric aircraft. I mean, there you go. There's your perfect case.
Starting small. Yeah, it's starting small, for sure.
Starting small, and then, obviously that's going to be the people who have the money to go do that. They're going to start off, and we're going to figure a lot of things out. It's similar to what like Garmin has done for years. So Garmin's technology was always GPS. So you and I probably know them originally as having the little handheld GPS you put in your car before cars had GPS, right? So you used to buy these little handheld Garmins. Well, Garmin has a whole aviation division out in Olathe, Kansas. And they started developing avionics a long time ago. Gee whiz, probably before 2000. So, yeah, they've been doing it a long time, 25, 30 years probably now. And if you watch them go, like, they don't develop airplanes, they just develop the avionics systems, the autopilots, all the flight controls. They do all the integration stuff. And, like, some of the products they're putting out now are freaking fantastic. Like, they got touchscreens, right? They simplified the interface. They have that safe return flight system for the Cirrus jet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? And they developed the same thing, I think, for a Piper airplane. One of the Pipers has the same system. Like, that's a Garmin thing. Like, they've just gradually added on, got smarter and smarter, and improved. And like the new G3X, which is their smaller system for, I think that's what Bay Aerospace is using in their aircraft. Like, wow, this is cool, right? This is really cool stuff. But they didn't go from making GPS and handheld GPS to put in your car to then designing flight control systems for Boeing. They didn't do that. They started out small and learned along the way and kept making it better and better and better. And now it's, in my opinion, they're a very serious player in the avionics world just because they have so much knowledge and history, and they have the infrastructure behind them to do something big or to make automated flight, like pilotless aircraft. There's no way that Garmin doesn't know how to do that. They have to know how to do that by now. I'm sure they haven't, when we get to the point where we can actually hop in an aircraft and say, I want to go from Williamstown, Massachusetts, I want to go visit Dan. Bink, I'm going to just punch it in there, and away I go. It's going to be a company like Garmin that's going to do that. It's not going to be a company like me doing that. It's going to be a company like Garmin that's going to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. All that GPS technology, I mean, it's come such a far way. Like, my brother-in-law who's in the military was talking about how when he entered the military, like, GPS wasn't a thing, like, for soldiers.
Nope.
And now, and then early on, he was pushing for it, and suddenly everyone can know. A couple years later, everyone can know where everyone else in their platoon is, and they can coordinate these missions so much better because they now know where everybody is. And that wasn't a thing for so long, and now it's just like every day, like, you can look on Snapchat and know where your friends are if they turn that setting on, which is creepy and strange. But yeah, I mean, GPS and all this tech, because Garmin, like you said, I never associated it with anything but in-car GPS, but it's infiltrating every aspect of our lives and tracking us and actually helping us move, travel around faster. So that's cool.
Yeah, and one of the things I designed when I first got out of college, I used to work for, was GE, and then it became Martin Marietta, then became Lockheed Martin, was I worked on the GPS Block 2R satellites, so I was designing antennas that are probably still flying, honestly. And I remember at that time, this is before my kids were born, so my kids don't know anything but having GPS, but this is some of the early generation of GPS satellites, and what a huge advantage it was for the United States to have that system, because you could tell where you were at any one time, right? Huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of, this will be kind of the last thing we touch on, but GE's in trouble. Have you listened to much of the business stock news recently?
Yeah. I don't own GE stock. I used to own a whole bunch of GE stock, and I got out of it before 2001, probably 2000. I got out of it because we worked there, and we used to, part of our incentive plan was you end up with all this GE stock. GE has really struggled mostly because of they were in the insurance business for a long time, and they had a GE Capital, so they had a lot of investments. And the insurance business, they tried to offload the insurance business, and they couldn't because no one wanted to take on that risk, particularly of insurance of older people. And so they've been carrying that on the books, and then whammo, eventually that's going to hit, and they're going to have a huge loss. And they did. I mean, so they're divesting of all sorts of things. I think they've divested of the down in Louisville, Kentucky, where they made a lot of appliances are gone. Obviously, anything around us, where I live right now, was GE Central. We're right in the middle of GE heaven here, and Jack Welch grew up, did a lot of his early stuff with GE Plastics just down the road. And yeah, right. This is a whole thing where when I hear other podcasts talking about Amazon or Facebook taking over the world, I say, yeah, that's what they said about GE. That's what they said about Sears. That's what they said about Kmart. That's what they said about all these companies that Standard Oil, all these companies that were going to take over the world and just never lasted 15, 20 years, and they were gone. GE, I hope it doesn't go away, because there's a lot of, that's one thing about GE is that they would hire the best people they could find, and then they would train them. And that was one of the lucky things that I happened just to fall backwards into, was they hired a bunch of engineers, and they put us in this Edison engineering program. And it was a 2-year program where they moved you around the company. You saw different parts of the company. But it was also, there was classroom training, and they would pay for your graduate degree. That was a huge thing. So GE has a ton of very bright, smart employees. And it pains me when you hear about GE struggling, because there's a lot of smart people that won't have jobs. That hurts.
Yeah. The news. I mean, the whole stock market situation right now is fascinating, just to monitor and see what's going on and what companies might make out of this and which ones might not.
Yeah.
And it's not, like you said, it's not necessarily for a lack of talent and quality people. No. It's just lots of external factors. So it's an interesting time we're in right now. Yeah,
it is, right? A lot of it's luck, right? They always say, one thing they say about like Apple computers is that's how you know that there is a God, because without a heavenly being, Apple computers would not exist. It's sort of like that. I mean, some part of being a business is luck and timing, and it doesn't have a lot to do with decisions. And I think in the case of GE, it may not have had to do with a lot of specific recent decisions as much as decisions that were made 20 years ago that are now just coming back to haunt them. And they really have no control over it. They just had to write it out.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Alan, thanks again for another great show. And if you're out there listening to us, thanks for being here. We appreciate you watching here on YouTube. Be sure to stick around and check out our channel for more clips and little snippets from the show. Also, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And definitely check us out at weatherguardaero.com, where you can find all of our resources for radome design engineers. Anything you want to learn about lightning protection, we have tons of stuff there to help you on our website. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you here on the next episode of the Struck Podcast.